Afternoon punters, I just thought I'd get the old video out and knock up a quick YouTube. Didn't get to it on Monday, but here we are. We'll have one unusually on Thursday, see how that goes. One of the reasons I wanted to just do another video to follow up on the last one I did, where I talked a lot about Matt and the change in his punting and how he's really gone from how his turnover's increased 10 times. Well, it's 10 times the size now than what it was. Is after I did that video, I had a number of emails from other clients that have had the same experience. So one of them was from Stu. Stu's a great fella. He often emails me with really good information about Sandown because he lives out that way, and some other good stable information. Just a really good fella, Stu. So keep up the good work, mate. And there's another, punter that's really increased his turnover, and that's only good for the industry. And when I was talking about that on the last video, I sort of thought about it afterwards. I thought, well, probably the reason the administrators don't put any effort in that area, because they probably don't understand how or what would need to be done to create punters that could go from a $50,000 a year turnover to $500,000. So it's the sort of thing that I wish they'd think more about and find out how to do it. And it's really all about providing the right kind of information and education to punters. And the punters out there are very clever, and I saw recently a bit of a discussion on Adam Blanco's Twitter about that, and I think one of the mistakes the administrators make is underestimating the younger people that would take an interest in racing, and how many of them there are out there that would, if the right sort of information was available to them and a little bit of education, how they would pick it up and run with it. Like I think poker to a large extent proves that, and the quality of playing poker has increased massively over the last decade or so because of all those young people. And like once upon a time, those poker tournaments were dominated by older, more experienced players, and now they tend to be dominated by the younger, sharper guys. So it's certainly some food for thought there for racing administrators. Much along the same lines, I also had an email from Warren. Warren's a guy that came to me after watching one of the videos I did with Ralphie last year, and he's been getting the service for probably 3 or 4 months now, and he was just writing how he's really enjoyed it. And one of the things for him is it showed him that how important it is to have discipline and to stay out of certain races and pick your target, and to avoid leakage. Leakage is a term that DK used on the show one day, and it's a really good term. It's just about when you have bets that you probably shouldn't have that are marginal, and you just leak a bit of oil, and how damaging that can be to your punting long term. So it's sort of, getting my service and thinking about his own betting, it's helped Warren tighten up his own game, and not just bet because you feel like having a punt, really waiting for opportunities that suit his method and style. So I think all those things are really important, and I'm delighted that I've played a part in helping punters increase their turnover, because that's only good for the industry and all of us. And it'd be really good if the administrators, certainly if they had that viewpoint, they'd operate more like Hong Kong do, and there certainly wouldn't be any reluctance whatsoever to stop horses being nominated for their first start without a public trial. And this business that goes on out at Cranbourne and other centres where lots of trials happen away from the public eye just simply wouldn't happen. And even just because you have a public trial, like I'll give you an example. Last week at Pakenham, there was a horse that was probably the top rated runner in a race called Buckhound. Now, if I'd have not gone and watched its jump outs, I would have marked it top pick and probably backed it. But it's a back marker, and its 2 jump outs looked terrible. Now, I'm probably guessing that horse wore some fairly heavy gear in those jump outs because it really struggled to keep up, particularly in the one at Werribee. And that put me off the horse, and as it turns out, probably a lot of other punters might have been in that boat too, because the horse got out to close to $8, I think, and was heavily back late into $4.80. So stables and connections can actually use those jump outs to their advantage. And John Sadler did a similar thing with Bramos when it was on debut at Sandown last year. So it's just information, and I really think that this idea that somehow connections get a better price because things are kept secret, it really is missing the point completely. Something else I just wanted to touch on. So well done to Stu and well done to Warren. I really appreciated those emails, and all the other punters out there that have increased their turnover. Let's keep up the good work. there was a really interesting situation that happened at Ballarat yesterday. I just wanted to touch on it because to me, it's something I've gone on about a lot in the videos over the years about horses are at their best when they're allowed to run naturally. Now, there's different versions of that for different stables. So like in Darren Weir's case, for instance, as an example, he rarely brings horses to the races until they're ready for it, until they're going to race in a fashion that allows them to distribute their energy well in races. So if he's got horses that are young and keen and everything else, he'll do a lot with them at jump outs and track work and stuff to try and knock that out of them before he brings them to the races. But other stables will bring them to the races. And a good example of that is Miss Leonidas. She's a very talented filly, but highly strung, and in a number of her early races, she just really over-raced badly, and they were 1,000-metre races. So unfortunately, you know, they took her to the races when she still had that in her, and then tried to restrain her, and she resented it, and you know, it can create bad habits that are very hard to get out of. Now, as it turns out yesterday, she drew gate 1, Dwayne Dunn riding. They intended to let us roll forward if that's the way it worked out, but as it turned out, she missed the start by 4 lengths. So because she missed the start by 4 lengths, a really interesting thing happened. Dwayne Dunn just allowed her to run, and she naturally did what, you know, she did what came natural to her, which was to chase the herd. And she took off like, you know, at a really high cruising speed, which was natural to her. And the rest of the field, as it turned out, stayed off the rail. So that meant there was plenty of room for it. So I think Dwayne just hung on for dear life. And she went right through underneath the field to the point where she hit the lead on the home turn. So it's a 1,000-metre race. They've only travelled 600 metres. She's given them 4-length start. She's hit the lead on the home turn. But because she's been allowed to run naturally for the first time in her life, she's actually built up a stack of momentum, and she's got speed. You know, she's got natural speed. You know, she's a faster horse than the horses she's racing against. So because she had that momentum up, she just took off on the home turn, and away she went. She's won the race by 4 to 5 lengths, and she's run really good figures. Now the problem is, some people think, well, we need to back her next start. She's, you know, whatever. The difficulty is that it only all happened because she missed the start, and then she was allowed to run naturally. It's very likely she'll go into a race next start, and they'll be back to trying to get her to relax and come back to the speed of the other horses. She'd be best placed if they can find a really fast race for her where she's able to run naturally with the other horses. But, you know, that's not, for a horse of her nature, that's not an easy thing to do. And the minute you start to restrain a horse like her, it can all go wrong very quickly. So it was just a really interesting case. It's worth having a look at, punters, if you didn't see that race. It was race 7 at Ballarat yesterday, and a really interesting set of circumstances. Now, I did note today that there's people on Twitter trying to get everyone to back Lucky for All in the race at Sandown on Saturday. And, you know, I think here's a horse that did something really nice at Warrnambool, come to Caulfield and produced a huge figure, right? It's a huge spike. Now, this horse could go any of 3 ways. It could improve again. It could hold that rating. It could come off that rating significantly. Now, the third option is most likely. He's unlikely to be able to match or improve the rating from Caulfield. It just is not likely. Now, at the start prior, when he was at Warrnambool, admittedly he sort of over-raced a bit early and he went up on the inside part of the track, but there wasn't a lot of difference between him and Heavenly Thought, and she's had a much nicer building run since. So it's a really interesting race. I hope they both turn up at Sandown, because they're both trained by Darren Weir, of course. But Heavenly Thought is also an acceptor in Brisbane, and I assume that whether she ends up there or not will depend on whether a flight is secured. I'm not sure if she's a mare or a filly or a colt, but anyway, it'd be a really interesting race at Sandown if they're both there, and I could certainly make a case where they could be closer together in the market, and I certainly don't think Lucky for All's a horse that should run odds on as the field currently stands, given that he seems more likely than anything to me to come off that rating that he produced at Caulfield. Just finally, a terrific meeting at Sandown on Saturday. I walked the track. The track's in great order, so the race well, people can bet confidently there. So I really hope the the turnover stacks up really strongly there at Sandown on Saturday. There's a couple of jumps races, and one of our old favourites, great man Juppy, will be covering those 2 jumps races for me on my full set. So for those punters that get the full set, the assessments will be provided by Juppy. And I think he did it last year, and I'm pretty sure he found both winners in his numbers. So he was down at Warrnambool. I bet I'm certain he's got a really good handle on all those horses that have been going around in that jump circuit. So terrific card there on Saturday, punters. I can't wait for it. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure there'll be some good strong bets to be had, and let's hope we get a quid. Cheers, punters.